Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau takes a shot at countries which rely heavily on the coal industry as the G20 summit wrapped up. An attack by the Taliban on a wedding in Afghanistan left 2 people dead and many more injured. We have details from our Foreign Affairs reporter, Lisa Daftari. And Canadian dairy officials say milk, cheese, and yogurt could go up as much as 15% in the new year. We will explain why.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau wrapped up a 2-day leaders summit at the G20 in Rome. He's flying next to Scotland for 2 days of negotiations at the UN climate talks.
On moving forward and identifying the phasing out of coal as an essential goal, on fighting and reducing methane emissions as being key, and also recognizing with the doubling of Canada's climate financing to the developing world how important it is that wealthy, successful countries in the industrialized world are there to support countries in the developing world to be able to make choices that will emit less and grow their economies. So there's work to do, and we're going to continue that work over the coming days with like-minded partners at COP.
U.S. President Joe Biden, meanwhile, told a UN summit that actions need to be taken this decade to contain climate change. Biden says none of us can escape the worst if we fail to seize the moment.
Will we seize the enormous opportunity before us? Or will we condemn future generations to suffer? This is the decade that will determine the answer, this decade. The science is clear. We only have a brief window left before us to raise our ambitions and to meet the task that's rapidly narrowing. There's no more time to hang back or sit on the fence or argue amongst ourselves. This is the challenge of our collective lifetimes. The existential threat to human existence as we know it. And every day we delay, the cost of inaction increases. So let this be the moment that we answer history's call.
Canada's Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland attended the G20's Leader Summit in Rome. She announced that Canada will donate another 10 million doses of Moderna vaccine to the COVAX Vaccine Sharing Alliance.
In terms of the actual delivery of doses, as we experienced to our own national frustration and anxiety this year, we don't have domestic biomanufacturing capacity. And so the reality is we do not control the manufacture of vaccines. What we can do is contribute money, which we have done. What we can do is be strategic in the contribution of that money. So in addition to the ACT Accelerator, the South Africa contribution for the production there is meaningful. The 70 million for distribution, I think, is really important because that is that last mile of vaccination. In the conversations that I had with finance and health ministers yesterday and the conversation today, the people who are technically involved in global vaccination said, that's a big part of the challenge right now.
Biotechnology company Novavax says it completed its submission to Health Canada for the regulatory evaluation of its protein-based COVID-19 vaccine. The U.S. company says the submission includes data from a trial involving 30,000 participants in the United States and Mexico. Novavax says the trial found 100% protection against moderate and severe disease and 94.4% of efficacy overall. It is also seeking regulator approval in the UK and Australia. It is also completing regulatory filings to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration by the end of the year. The Liberal government has appealed to a federal court ruling that upheld an earlier decision ordering it to pay $40,000 to First Nations children removed from their homes because Ottawa underfunded child welfare on reserves. Ministers say while the paperwork has been filed, the parties will try and sort out a compensation package outside of court.
We could implement the orders as written tomorrow. 1, it would not fix the system which continues to be broken. It would advance very little on long-term reform. 2, the other class actions that would purport to compensate other peoples, other classes of children that have suffered equally, if not worse harm, would not get compensated. There are interlocking issues, sometimes children represented in theory by 3 different counsel. So we are juggling very, very complex legal files. And when people lawyer up, people get dug in. So what we're doing today, as opposed to the past, is filing a notice of appeal. But what we're not doing as a government is spending time and energy taking adversarial positions. We're saying to the parties, and we thank them for the work that they've done, is we're putting a very significant financial package forward to do 2 things: to compensate children that have suffered that harm over a broad period of time, and to move forward on something that is so crucial so that we're not reproducing the broken model that got us into this position in the first place.
The Canadian Dairy Commission is recommending a large hike in farm gate milk prices, which would raise the cost of dairy products on shelves next year. The Crown Corporation says an 8.4% increase for processors is expected to be approved by provincial authorities next month and will take effect on February the 1st. Officials say the retail price of milk in grocery stores could increase by as much as 10%. They say products like butter, cheese, and yogurt could soar as much as 15%. In a release today, the City of Lethbridge says the final day to deliver to yard waste sites will be Sunday, November 14th. The 3 sites will close on Monday, November 15th. City officials say you can take your old pumpkins or jack-o'-lanterns to the sites as well. To date, the sites have collected a total of 1.95 million kilograms, or 1,957 tons of yard waste, which was diverted from landfill. Officials say they could easily surpass 2,000 tons of yard waste this season, which would be a new record for Lethbridge. Lethbridge College will be sending 2 lucky guests on a trip to beat the heat in January. The college will provide tickets for the 2 recipients to take a trip to Florida to enjoy a game between the Miami Heat and the Toronto Raptors. All of the money raised by the raffle will go towards supporting Lethbridge College students financially.
There's a lot of different needs students have this time of year, whether it be mental health supports or help with their own personal bills, things of that nature. There's always needs students have. So this money will go right into kind of generally helping students with what they need. I guess this time of year, like I said, it's always, Christmas, the holidays, kids have gotten through the first semester. So now they're starting to see that maybe the money isn't going as far as they thought it would, or they're getting ready for the next semester and there's unexpected expenses that come up.
Tickets for the event will be available until November the 18th. If you're in the market for a new vehicle, you may have to wait a little bit longer than you should or you would before the pandemic. Supply chain delays involving a shortage of microchips means there are fewer cars to buy across Canada. That's leaving some car lots looking like a ghost town.
We really only have about a dozen cars, new cars on the ground. We're showing 60 plus on our website, but those are incoming units combined with the 12 we have. And this is unprecedented for our industry as dealerships are suffering to get vehicles in stock and get people driving new cars. We're selling hybrids. And so this really affects the hybrids and affects trucks. So it's Toyota's move to have a hybrid option in its entire fleet by the year 2024. This really is affecting our production, and Toyota also announced a 40% cut in global production as well. That's compounding this.
Brown adds that there is currently a 2 to 3 year waiting period for the all-new RAV4 Prime. The Coaldale Night of Lights Festival was cancelled due to the pandemic, but now there are new events showing up for artists and the public to enjoy. The Coaldale Night of Lights Market allows artisans to showcase their interesting inventions and sell them to the public. Organizers for the night market say these events are important in supporting small businesses.
Sometimes this is everybody's livelihood. Sometimes it's maybe a side job, but it could be also a main business that people survive on. And small business has been hit very, very hard during this time. And we are just trying to focus on the aspect of supporting small business and pushing all the other controversial subjects aside and trying to just welcome everyone and bring everyone together and focus on the small business aspect of it. So it's super, super important that everybody comes out. Without the community support, these crafters and small business will not be able to survive.
The Coaldale Night Market will take place on November the 19th. Yeah, Christmas just around the corner. A great time to start your Christmas shopping. Well, our poll question for our website is, do you put up Christmas decorations before Remembrance Day, November the 11th? Make sure you log on to our website, bridgecitynews.ca, and let us know your thoughts. We'll tabulate the results and have them for you just before Remembrance Day. Alberta's on track to have its deadliest year for opioid deaths. The latest numbers released by the province show that on average, 4 people die a day from overdoses across Alberta. The numbers have been on the rise since May of 2020, when overdose deaths jumped 45%. Since then, more than 100 people have died each month. Employees who work at the City of Calgary are now required to disclose whether they've received their COVID-19 shots. Employees must also upload proof of vaccination. Some exemptions are being provided, but those who are not fully immunized must participate in free rapid testing now until December 1st. Employees will be required to cover the cost of their own rapid tests if they're not fully vaccinated by December. Manitoba's governing PC party has chosen Heather Stephenson as its new leader and the province's new premier. Stephenson, the province's first woman premier, won over former member of parliament Shelley Glover by less than 400 votes. Glover is yet to concede defeat.
We have representatives from so many different areas across Manitoba, from our First Nations, Métis, labor, business, first responders, and many different cultural and ethnic backgrounds. Many of these people here today didn't necessarily feel comfortable being a part of our party in the past. Well, hello, Manitoba. Welcome to the new PC Party of Manitoba.
A strike at the University of Manitoba could happen as soon as tomorrow. The union representing faculty members and librarians says its members are prepared to strike Tuesday unless they receive a better contract offer. The two sides are in mediation, but the Faculty Association says it has not received a reasonable offer. Salaries are the main sticking point. The government of Saskatchewan says it has a new strategy that will bring more international students to the province. The new education plan includes reaching out globally, building capacity and leadership, and enhancing the province's profile over the next 5 years. Education officials say this strategy was developed together with post-secondary schools. The province's international education is a major contributor to Saskatchewan's economy. Australia opened its borders for the first time since March of last year. Fully vaccinated Australian permanent residents and citizens are now free to travel abroad.
Be able to come home without having to go to quarantine is huge. There's a lot of people on that flight who have loved ones who are about to die. People have had people that died this week, so for them to be able to get off the plane and go and see them straight away is pretty amazing.
The reports of Taliban gunmen who attacked a wedding in eastern Afghanistan to stop music from being played. The attack killed 2 people and injured 10 others. Our foreign affairs reporter, Lisa Daftari, says it appears as though the Taliban is clamping down on anything associated with Western culture.
By the way that they are cracking down on any sort of vice that they deem is Western and anti-Islamic, like music, like the arts, like dancing, like sports, like women being educated, and the list goes on. So unfortunately, this is a horrific story about a wedding being disrupted, 2 being killed, many others injured, because this group that claimed to be of the Taliban wanted to stop the music from being played.
Lisa will also discuss how more journalists are being attacked in Afghanistan. She'll have more details coming up in the second half of our program. It was on this day that the U.S. exploded the first hydrogen bomb. The Sistine Chapel paintings are shown to the public for the first time, and NFL legendary running back Walter Payton dies. This is Today in History for November the 1st.
November 1st, 1765. The Stamp Act takes effect as Britain imposes a tax on its American colonists. They respond with stiff resistance, and Britain later repeals the act. But the episode sets the stage for the American Revolution a decade later. 1952. The United States explodes the first hydrogen bomb, codenamed Mike. The test takes place at the Eniwetok Atoll in the Marshall Islands in the South Pacific. 1512. At the Vatican, Michelangelo's paintings on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel are first shown to the public. 1954. In North Africa, Algerian nationalists begin their successful 8-year rebellion against French rule. And 1999.
Every guy, every offensive lineman that played for the Chicago Bears helped me get that 16,000 yards, and I thank them.
Walter Payton, the NFL's all-time leading rusher, dies of bile duct cancer in Barrington, Illinois. The former Chicago Bears running back was 45. Today in history, November 1st. James Limbach, The Associated Press.
Millions of refugees who fled war and economic hardships in the Middle East and Africa have now made their way to Europe. As we hear in this next report, a Christian foundation in Germany has created a unique housing project to help refugees adapt to their new lives.
Khalil is a refugee who fled the war in Syria with his family. After living in a one-room apartment for 4 years, they now have their own kitchen, bathroom, and 2 bedrooms, thanks to a creative housing project supported by German Christians. The project helps refugees adjust to life in Germany by housing local families under the same roof with arrivals from other countries. The concept has worked well in several German cities and has now come to the southern city of Constance, where the mayor helped inaugurate 20 new Hope House apartments. Roland Eberle is the site manager.
The purpose is to integrate refugees with people that live a long time in Germany, to give them a perspective for the future. One big word that we use is empowerment, to make people stand on their own feet.
Herzlich willkommen im Bekherhatana.
Welcome, everyone. We're happy to have you as our guest.
This integrated living project is built on biblical values.
Glaube, Liebe, Hoffnung. It's faith, Glaube, Liebe, love, and hope. And that's what we try to live. We are not a mission organization. We are not an evangelistic organization. We are an integrative organization, and we want to show the love of Christ, and that people are able to participate with this love and to hopefully find Jesus in that.
It's been a long and hard journey to this community from countries like Syria and Afghanistan.
I
don't have a family. I fled to Iran when I was 12, and at some point I came to Germany. For 5 years I lived in a refugee center, a shared accommodation. It is wonderful that I have now found the House of Hope and have so many nice people around me.
A total of 4 Hope Houses have been built in Constance, each with 5 apartments of different sizes. The Hope Foundation has invested nearly $7 million in constructing this group of ecologically and economically sustainable buildings. Local families are making their own investment as they live alongside the refugees. They include the Robles family, who immigrated from Colombia a few years ago.
And not only to help physically, right, but also spiritually. Speaking to them about Jesus is very important. I think the main thing. And truthfully, I really like this project because I feel like I'm with family.
And for Khalil and his family, neighbors who share their love and support are a special benefit to living in this house of hope. Stan Jeter, Global News Alliance.
Great to see the work that they're doing. You know, when it comes to dealing with difficult people or situations, many believe that the best thing we can do is turn to God. Dan Fox is a pastor and author of the new book called Is My Butt Too Big? But butt as in B-U-T, not B-U-T-T. Pastor Dan says believing and reaching out to God is key in managing through a lot of life struggles.
We need to believe again that there can be something significant in our lives. It may not be world-shattering or world-changing, but for an individual that we work with or a neighbor, it might be life-changing for eternity for that individual if we would just hear from God and run and walk with his will. And it's really that opening chapter about believing again, that we can be used of God and that our lives can matter and we can make a difference.
Pastor Dan will have more on why we need to believe and on his new book, Is My Butt Too Big?, coming up later in our broadcast. And coming up right after Bridge City News tonight, make sure you watch for Pastor Leon Fontaine, the CEO of Miracle Channel, with another edition of Return to Reason. Well, it was another cold start here in southwestern Alberta. Fortunately, the mercury will be climbing. Full weather details are on deck. We had a lot of sunshine again in Lethbridge, but much cooler. Tonight, it should be mainly clear with a low near -11. Tuesday, mainly sunny with a high expected near 8 degrees. Wednesday, sunshine again and even warmer with a high of 14. Thursday, a few clouds should roll in, but we should see a high near 19. Friday, cooling off slightly under a mainly cloudy sky at 12 degrees. Not a bad weekend is shaping up so far either. Expect sunshine mixed with cloud and 11 degrees for both Saturday and Sunday. Now, the average high for this time of year is 9 degrees with an average low of -4. The highest temperature in the state was recorded in 1947 at 21 degrees, and the record low was a very cold -27 in 1984. Sunrise was at 8:20, sunset 6:09. The days are definitely shorter now. Looking at Tuesday's national forecast, expect rain and 7 degrees for Victoria, BC, mainly cloudy and 8 degrees for Vancouver. It should be mainly clear and 5 degrees for Edmonton. Sunshine and 11 is on tap for Calgary. It should be partly cloudy and 2 degrees in Regina on Tuesday. Just a few clouds and 3 degrees in Saskatoon. There's a slight chance of flurries developing in Winnipeg on Tuesday with a high expected near +1. Showers and 9 is on tap for Toronto. Expect rain and 8 degrees for Ottawa. Partly cloudy and 9 degrees for Montreal. In Atlantic Canada, it should be mainly sunny and 10 degrees for Fredericton, New Brunswick. Sunshine and 12 degrees for Halifax, Nova Scotia. Mainly sunny and 11 for Charlottetown, PEI. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect periods of drizzle and a high near 12 degrees on Tuesday. Consumers could be facing major price hikes for dairy products next year to offset increased production costs for farmers due to the pandemic. The Canadian Dairy Commission is recommending a record 8.4% increase in milk prices to take effect on February the 1st. The Crown Corporation says the price hike must still be approved by provincial authorities. That is expected to take place next month. Agri-food experts say the retail price of milk in grocery stores could increase as much as 10%, while butter, cheese, and yogurt could go up by as much as 15%. Cargojet says its third quarter revenue jumped 17% to $189.5 million. The Ontario-based company says its net loss for the quarter narrowed to $12.9 million. That compares with a loss of $20.4 million a year earlier. Cargojet says supply bottlenecks and freighter and trucking shortages have boosted demand for its time-sensitive overnight air cargo services. It also says online sales exploded during the pandemic, allowing the company to expand its relationship with e-commerce giant Amazon earlier this year. Bell Canada apologized to smartphone customers for jumping the gun on the time change, which is not due to take effect until next weekend. Customers complained about disruptions to their mornings because of the error that automatically changed their phone settings to end daylight saving time. Bell says an issue with its system caused the time to go back an hour. It says the problem has been resolved, but users may need to restart their devices or briefly switch their smartphone to airplane mode to fix the problem. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 209 points on the day to finish at 21,247. The Dow was up 94 points to 35,913. The S&P 500 was up 8 points to 4613. And the Nasdaq was up 97 points on the day to 15,595. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 48 cents to 84.05 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 24 cents to 5.19 US. Gold was up 3 cents to 17.9331 US an ounce. And silver was down a cent to 24.04 US an ounce. Wheat is at $11.78 per bushel. Barley's at $9.51. Canola's at $22.13. And corn is at $10.31 per bushel. Live cattle were down 43 cents to $128.85. Feeder cattle were down $2.18 to $154.40. And lean hogs were up 8 cents to $76.15. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 80.85 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, the Canadian Dairy Commission is recommending a large hike in farm gate milk prices, which would raise the cost of dairy products on shelves next year. The Crown Corporation says an 8.4% increase for processors is expected to be approved by provincial authorities next month and will take effect on February the 1st. Officials say the retail price of milk in grocery stores could increase by as much as 10%. They say products like butter, cheese, and yogurt could soar as much as 15%. The Taliban is clamping down on Western culture, even opening fire at weddings in Afghanistan. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari will have details for us in just a moment. You know, being a journalist can sometimes be risky business, especially when you're covering terrorist organizations overseas. The reports that gunmen on a motorcycle shot at a broadcast journalist in his car in the Afghan capital of Kabul, wounding him. To talk about this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari. Lisa, Ali Sharifi, a journalist for the Islamic Republic of Iran Broadcasting, survived the attack late Friday night.
Yeah, there's two sides to this story, right? First is to look at the crimes of the Taliban. Of course, in Kabul, more than anywhere else, you're seeing this hot spot of recurring attacks on people like the volleyball player from the women's team that was killed last week, and this week we're seeing an attack on a journalist, more attacks on other journalists and dancers and people who are in the arts. So obviously this is something that we're going to keep our eye on to see how this all ends up. We were told that this is not going to be the Taliban of the 90s, but they're proving to be worse, far worse, and the West has taken their eyes off of the Taliban. The only discussions we're hearing is about how much aid they're going to get. Let me tell you, that aid is not going to go for the people of Afghanistan. It's going to go towards terrorism and more of their terrorist sprees, and we know that. On the other hand, this is a journalist from the Islamic Republic, meaning there's a reason why this guy was allowed to be on the ground over there. You're not going to see, Western journalists, particularly women, freely reporting in Afghanistan, but here you have a male from the Islamic Republic. They're of the same kind. The Taliban and the Islamic Republic. The Islamic Republic doesn't have a free press, so if you have a journalist from there, this guy is working for a state-run organization which is pro-regime and knows how to deal with the Taliban and other terror organizations, and they know the lay of the land, and they know Islamic law, Sharia law, and they know how to behave. So if this is going on, then I would say it's probably a random crime. Just more of the same, but it gives us a perspective as to what's going on the ground in Afghanistan.
Lisa, there are also reports that Taliban gunmen also attacked a wedding in eastern Afghanistan to stop music being played, killing at least 2 and injuring 10 others.
Yes, if you recall, the Taliban of the 90s, from 1996 to 2001, put a decree in forbidding music. This new Taliban has not yet issued a decree, but we can tell by the way that they are cracking down on any sort of vice that they deem is Western and anti-Islamic, like music, like the arts, like dancing, like sports, like women being educated, and the list goes on. So unfortunately, this is a horrific story about a wedding being disrupted, 2 being killed, many others injured, because this group that claimed to be of the Taliban wanted to stop the music from being played. Look, they are really smacking down, and they're letting the people of Afghanistan know what they stand for and what they don't stand for. And this is nothing new, it's nothing progressive, and it's nothing reformed from the old Taliban. And we're not hearing anything from rights groups or people in the West. All we hear about is, how this is going to be different than the Taliban of the 90s, but we're not seeing anything of the sort.
The Taliban's supreme leader made his first public appearance since taking control of the group back in 2016, addressing supporters in the southern city of Kandahar.
Yeah, interesting, because we haven't seen this guy ever since he took over the group. What's interesting is that he didn't give this new speech in Kabul, where we know that there are a lot of people against the Taliban takeover in the capital city, but it was in a southern province. This shows us they're taking a page out of the Islamic Republic of Iran's handbook, where they are pandering to the lower socioeconomic brackets, the more religious brackets, those who may support them and be okay with a Taliban takeover, but they have not had the guts, or they're not brave enough to go into the capital city of Kabul, where we know that there has been such a heavy opposition to the Taliban takeover, to make their statements there. What it also shows us is that little by little, the Taliban are, coming into their own, confidently stepping onto the scene and saying, we don't have to be in hiding anymore. We're on Twitter, we come out into weddings, we come out into the public, and we're giving speeches. So they definitely feel as though they have steady ground to stand on. And of course they do. And they're being legitimized by places like the UN and the West, where there is such a call to legitimize the Taliban. They also have friends in Pakistan and China and Iran who are calling for the West and other nations to support them and legitimize them just like they do.
U.S. President Joe Biden says the United States will respond to actions Iran has taken against Washington's interests, including recent drone strikes. Now, this comes after American officials have blamed Iran for a drone attack on a remote U.S. outpost in Syria, Lisa.
Yeah, there's mixed messages coming from the White House with regards to Iran. On the one hand, there's talk of how quickly can we get back to the negotiating table, that the major world powers would like to sit back down with Iran to discuss a potential deal going forward. And on the other hand, there are threats or sort of a retaliation kind of tone saying, don't you dare do X, Y, and Z, because we will respond measure for measure, including the drone strikes. Don't think that these are pinpointed and silent and that we won't respond to them. So there's definitely mixed messaging coming from the White House. And what is the Iranian regime to believe? They are, the United States is rushing towards another deal with us. They would love to get back into another deal, but then they serve up these empty threats. They're not going anywhere. They know exactly where they stand. And unfortunately, they believe that with this current White House, they're the ones who have the upper hand in going forward and striking a deal with the West.
Fortunately, there were no deaths or injuries reported as a result of that October 20th drone strike attack here. Now, Lisa, speaking of which, the U.S. Air Force is flexing its muscles recently as it flew a B-1B strategic bomber over key maritime choke points in the Middle East with allies, including Israel, amid ongoing tensions with Iran as its nuclear deal, which you mentioned, remains in tatters.
Yeah, another instance of mixed messaging, right? This is the old United States foreign policy where we are, allied with Israel, the only democracy in the Middle East that is our partner in the Middle East, militarily and otherwise. And yet we have this drill with Israel in flexing muscles against Iran, which has shown much more provocation in the region as of late. So trying to deliver a message there. But again, what is that message saying? And then what's the message of saying we want to get back into a deal with you? Look, the Iranian regime, they're no dummies. They're looking at this, the flexing of military muscle and saying, all right, you want to show us that you're partnered up with Israel, our enemy in the region. Well, we'll retaliate against them and we'll also get a deal because that's what you're telling us. It's being understood as something very different. I cover Iranian press. I follow their tweets. I read what's going on in Farsi. And look, they take us for fools here in the United States. So the mixed messaging isn't helping to deliver a stern message to the Iranian regime, to the Ayatollahs. It's just doing the opposite. But on the other hand, the silver lining here being that we are doing and conducting drills with Israel, our ally. And despite what you may hear from four very bitter congresswomen who are anti-Israel, our relationship with Israel is still intact, it seems.
Now, Lisa, the first images of China's new controversial jet have emerged. The two-seater Chengdu J-20 is the latest in China's stealth fighter fleet. Let me ask you something. Should we be concerned here in the West?
Yeah, absolutely. The fact that there are articles and headlines about China's new technology tells me one thing. We should be very worried about how quickly and with such motivation that they're carrying forward their weapons program in the sense of development, research, coming up with new technologies. Before, in the past 2 decades, it used to be our worry was that China was copying our technology, right? They would capture a drone and they would copy it and then they'd put it out under a different name, or they'd capture a drone from some other country and copy it and put it out under a different name. Now we're worried about them actually surpassing the United States. And there have been many experts that have come out in recent months to say, hello, wake up. We need to watch China. They are becoming militarily very, very advanced and taking on the United States with regards to the competition in military might, and the fact that they are putting out, articles and it's news that they're putting out new technology, then that's something that we should definitely be focused in on.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi. It was all part of the recent Group of 20 summit. Now, officials say the outreach was designed to ensure that the highly competitive nature between the two world's largest economies doesn't really veer into open conflicts.
Yeah, they can try. I mean, look, this kind of diplomacy that this administration loves to use never works, particularly with the Chinese partners. Look, the Chinese are out for blood. They're out to beat us on everything. They're not looking to collaborate. They're not here to hold hands and go forward together. They're here to beat us. And regardless of how many sideline talks they can have at the G20 or any other summit, the Chinese have made it very clear that they are competitive, that they want an edge, not just in their own region, but globally. And they do have an edge in many, many areas. And that's something to worry about. Look, Anthony Blinken should come home and say, I met with the Chinese, my Chinese counterpart, and the discussion didn't go anywhere. And we exchanged words. But the action and the tone, I should say, is clear that the Chinese want to speed on forward, and that's really a wake up call. We can travel to these summits and we can use diplomacy as much as we want, but there's not going to be any change in behavior from rogue states like China, like Iran, like North Korea, where they want to employ nuclear diplomacy. It's just not going to work. We have to think of other solutions to these foreign policy crises.
I wonder how much tension there'll be as well between U.S. President Joe Biden and Xi Jinping in China, especially when I was a kid growing up. I don't know about you, but almost everything I had was made in China. The toys, a lot of my clothes, and now there's this kind of a protectionist vision now with Joe Biden that, let's bring all the manufacturing, everything back into the United States. So that may not sit well with Xi Jinping.
No, it won't sit well with him, and it's going to be almost impossible. Look, we are in a supply crisis here in the West, particularly in the United States, something that's being talked about very much. I think it's something that was on Biden's agenda at the G20 as well, to talk about the supply chain crisis that's going on globally. Obviously, the perfect storm being the pandemic and a labor shortage and supply shortage and all of that, contributing to the crisis that we have. Now, in the midst of all of this, imagine how difficult it'll be to bring manufacturing back to the United States. Virtually impossible when we are relying on cheap labor and cheap manufacturing from China. Of course, the moral of the story being that we should not rely on China because we can't get these goods to come in. But in the midst of this labor shortage and everything else that's going on here in the United States, with prices being, skyrocketing, I don't know how it is in Canada, but we're feeling it at the pumps, we're feeling it at the grocery store, we're feeling it everywhere. Basic things are costing, a 50% or more in many areas, and there's no supply. You go to the grocery store and the shelves are actually empty. And because of this crisis, it's going to be very difficult to really point our fingers at the Chinese and say, we're going to teach you a lesson. I think it's going to be the other way around.
Ed, you're right here. Inflation has gone up 4.4%, and we're talking about the food, shelter, gas prices. You're absolutely right, Lisa. It's being felt all over the place. Now, here's a real sad story. A knife and an arson attack on an underground train line in Tokyo, Japan, left at least 17 people injured. Police arrested a 24-year-old man who was wearing a costume similar to the Joker, except this was no joke.
No, this is awful. I mean, the reason why I included this in my morning briefing this morning is because you don't see this kind of crime coming out of Japan, which is why it's a real story. If this was coming out of Manhattan or Chicago, I don't think it would be as much of a story, even though it is here in the West. This is a story because you don't see crime like this happening in Japan. It's a place where people are trusting of one another. They leave their doors open. There's an honesty policy. And to see this kind of anger and this kind of violence against people that are just riding in a train, it's just horrific. This was a horrific story. I don't know if it was influenced by Halloween or if it was influenced by movies and such, but this person was obviously not well mentally, and very, very sad for the families of the victims. Really sad, something that you don't expect just riding a train.
You're right. I have friends in Japan, in Tokyo specifically, and it's not part of their culture, this kind of violence, so it is a shock for many people in that region. Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining us once again from Los Angeles. Thanks so much, Lisa.
My pleasure.
Many people today have common doubts, especially when it comes to what's taking place in society today, and where does God fit in all of this? To help make some sense of this is pastor and author Dan Fox. Dan has written a book called Is My Butt Too Big? Butt as in B-U-T, not B-U-T-T. And Dan has been involved in a number of ministries over the years, including youth ministries, various church board positions, and you may have also seen him right here on Miracle Channel. Pastor Dan, welcome back to Bridge City News.
Hello, Hal. Thanks for having me.
Now, Pastor Dan, I was looking into the heart of your book, Is My Butt Too Big? And it's not really a weight loss book, but more of a book to rid ourselves of common doubts and finding God's will for our lives.
That's exactly it. That's exactly what it's about. And I find that a lot of people, all of us, we attend church and year after year, and we kind of sometimes can lose our zeal. This is sort of a book to help us shore up the foundation. Even an old foundation can get a few cracks in it, so nothing wrong with doing a little work to shore things up and get our enthusiasm and our excitement back, finding God's purpose and will for us, even in the day-to-day, not necessarily something life-changing, but just maybe you need to pray with somebody at work that's struggling with their marriage or something along those lines, just walking in God's will. That's what the book's really helping to steer us towards. At least that's my desire, my hope for it.
So how important is prayer then in our walk with God?
Prayer is that's that relationship. I mean, Jesus said very clearly, we have to stay connected. He's the vine and we're the branches. And if we're not connected, no matter how good our intentions, we're not getting that grace and that help and that real direction from God on a regular basis. Staying connected is the biggest thing, because then we know we're not just doing something that's good, but we're doing what God's asking us to do. And that's key. If we really want his blessing, his strength, and his best in our lives, is to be doing what he's asked us to do, not necessarily doing everything that needs to be done.
A lot of people would agree saying that communication is key, communication with our spouses, with our kids, with our coworkers, and with our Heavenly Father. And that's what prayer can really offer there. Now, how did you come up with the title, Is My Butt, as in B-U-T, Too Big? What is it all about?
Well, really, I kind of thought it was clever once it kind of came to me, but honestly, it's from chapter 5 in the book. And really, I find that a lot of people, as we hear these scriptures day after day, year after year, when we walk with the Lord, and they become almost cliche, things like, by Jesus' stripes we're healed, or no weapon formed against you shall prosper. And then we'll pray those things in our prayer closet when we're going through a struggle. And yet out of our own mouths, within hours later, someone will ask us how we're doing. I said, yeah, I know the Bible says that by his stripes I'm healed, but it just doesn't seem to be making any difference. It's those buts, but it just doesn't seem to be. And, it might be a financial need. And I know the Bible says he'll meet all of our needs according to his riches and glory in Christ Jesus. But I still seem to struggle. I never have enough money at the end of the month. The bills are always overdue. It's those but statements. They undermine our faith. Faith isn't to be like a light switch turned on and off in our lives. We either believe the word or we don't. So the best thing we can do is we know we believe it. So let's just keep agreeing with it, regardless of what the circumstances say. Agree with what God said and allow him an open door continually to flow his power into our life. Stop switching that power off by allowing our own buts to undermine God's will in our life.
So how often do Christians come to you as well, and I've talked to pastors about this in the past, where we go down on our knees, we pray to our Heavenly Father, we've got concerns, and instead of leaving it at the cross, we stand up and take those problems right back away from God and start stressing out about them?
Oh, that happens so much. I mean, I've been in ministry a lot of years now and involved in a lot of different ways in ministry, from children's ministry all the way through, even seniors. I did men's ministry, did some street youth outreach, and you see people struggle in the same way. And it's that not trusting God over the long haul, or not continually. Although we trust him in our heart, we believe he's God and he loves us, we tend to try to fix things ourselves and pull things back into our own hands, or we lose sight of the fact that Jesus said, all things are possible to him who believes. And we shut off, again, that faith with just those statements of, yeah, but it doesn't seem to be working, or why is it taking so long? Instead of just saying, I know that God is in this, and I know that he's on my side and he's helping me. And together, we're going to see a breakthrough. I don't know how long it's going to take, but I believe God. Continue with that instead of turning that faith off. And really, everybody struggles with that. This book is just a tool to help us really see that clearly, help our understanding, and get ourselves focused again on doing his will and walking with him.
Now, a number of churches have really struggled during the pandemic. What do you feel is the greatest need in the church today?
Honestly, love and unity, and I guess for each of us to really humbly realize that we're just a small piece of a big picture that God is painting, and not just as an individual, but even as a church. There's a lot of different beliefs out there, a little different doctrinal differences, and really we're not in competition with each other.
but we really should be out there just winning the world to Christ and showing them what real love and genuine care and concern for those in our own community is all about. And really that'll draw people back into the church and draw new believers in. Jesus said to himself, well, they'll know us by your love, our love for one another. And really we could do better at letting the world see that instead of little infighting or disagreements or competition with another church. We're not in competition. We just want to see the world one for Christ. And that's what we're all about.
A number of years ago, I was involved in a basketball ministry, bringing a lot of young people in kind of a side door into the church and leading that until, of course, they got to be a lot stronger and faster than I was as a basketball player. Then I kind of sat out from the sidelines and I cheered them on after that. But how can we bring young people back into the church? What are your thoughts?
Honestly, there needs to be some passion. Passion is something that I talk about in this book. And really that comes from finding God's will and purpose. If young people are just told, this is how you have to behave and this is what you have to do, instead of encouraged to develop that relationship with God and an ear to his voice and recognize that God is concerned with their future and every part of it and has a plan and a purpose for each of them. When youth realize God has a plan and a purpose for their life, and that when they get on their knees alone with him on a daily basis, they can hear from him. And then the passion grows when they realize, my goodness, day to day, not just the big things, but even in the little things, praying for someone at school, a classmate, I can walk in God's will. I can know that God has asked me to do this and do it on a regular basis. Then life becomes exciting and walking with God becomes exciting. But when it's just a list of to-dos and behavioral changes that you have to make on your own, there's nothing too exciting about that.
How can many of us help support so many pastors who've been struggling during the pandemic? I mean, they're human. We're all human here. And many have struggled with things like anxiety and depression.
Yeah, I guess the best thing we can do is just be that encourager, constantly reminding them that they're loved, they're appreciated, and that they don't walk alone. And I mean, for so many of us, the pandemic has really pulled us back out of our church service, and so many feel not as plugged in. And for pastors, seeing so many that they've ministered to for so many years not attending and not sure how they're doing, or I mean, that's a stressful weight on anybody. How would we feel if one or two of our children were out of contact with us for a year or two and we have no idea how they're doing? We're praying for them, believing for them, we raised them, and yet we're not hearing from them. And that's how pastors feel. And it is a hard job. A lot of times those tough things behind the scenes, I don't think many believers appreciate how much they do and what they're doing. And even when they're on their own at home, some may think that they've got it easy. They only work one day a week, but they're on their knees praying for hours. They're in hospitals visiting. They're at people's houses trying to restore marriages that are having difficulties. And there's so much going on behind the scenes. And with a pandemic like this, keeping people out of church, it's even harder and hard on them to know how to reach people that they're not seeing on a regular basis anymore.
Yeah, definitely. Pastors and the shepherds need their flock. Now, Pastor Dan, what motivated you to write Is My Butt Too Big?
Well, really, I guess, Hal, I felt motivated to write this book. The idea came to me in church, but it came kind of as a nucleus of what direction the book was supposed to take. But really, it was because of the years of struggle I see people going through, where year after year they attend church faithfully, and yet they still struggle in life where they should have success, or they have not necessarily anxiety and some, but almost boredom instead of enthusiasm about the things of God. And God put the book in my heart and told me in no uncertain terms, gave me the name, and said, write this. And it took a long time to write. It's not a very large book. I've been writing a lot since, and I found I can put things together fairly quick. But this one took some time, and it was really trying to get God's heart and have an ear for him and what he wanted to say. And I think it was really because people struggle with sometimes the same thing year after year, and they really shouldn't. And the Lord doesn't want to see that. As believers, we should be progressing, and not just in our faith, but even in our life and our relationships with others around us. We should be progressing, becoming more and more Christ-like, and experience his blessing and his best in our lives. But the years shouldn't go by getting monotonous, but more exciting. And that's really where it came from.
Now, your book opens with a chapter entitled Dare to Dream. Why begin there?
Well, that's a good question, Hal. You know, as children, we all have these great ideas and visions and goals of what we want to do and what we want to become. And I think the school of hard knocks, just life in general, has a way of grinding so much of that out of us. And the book really has to open up and get us to look back at, we can believe for more. You know, Jesus said we need to have faith like a child. Perhaps that's part of why, because we need to believe again that there can be something significant in our lives. It may not be world shattering or world changing, but for an individual that we work with or a neighbor, it might be life changing for eternity for that individual if we would just hear from God and run and walk with his will. And it's really that opening chapter about believing again that we can be used of God and that our lives can matter and we can make a difference.
Now, you talked a bit about passion earlier, and passion in your book here. I mean, a passion towards God is vital to help us to grow. But what other areas of our lives should we focus in on when it comes to passion?
Well, really, I think that's the biggest thing that's going to bring that passion is finding that you're doing what God has asked you to do. And that's not necessarily some huge ministry or heading out to the mission field. It could be as simple as somebody that you see on a regular basis that maybe isn't saved. Maybe the Holy Spirit's been asking you, invite them out to that men's breakfast or invite them out to that church service. And yet for some reason, those little things, we seem to be shy or wondering if we should. But you know, when it's the Holy Spirit and you know that he's asking you, you can hear it on the inside. If you just start running with that, say, do it anyway. And don't worry about the outcome, just do what he's asking you to do. That's when your passion starts to grow and increase. It's not like we can make ourselves passionate, but just by finding ourselves doing God's will, we start to see his hand and his power flowing through us to make a difference. And boy, we can get passionate about things then. It gets way more exciting. And it'll start to affect every area of your life. When you see God's will in that area of your life and you start walking in it, boy, it's easy to get excited about life again.
So, Pastor Dan, I'm a viewer at home. I'm watching Bridge City News on Miracle Channel here. What can I hope to gain after reading your book?
Well, really I think some keys, Hal. Just keys that will help us get our thinking right again and get our focus back. And it's easy to lose focus. This world is busy, life is busy, and boy, through this pandemic, it's been a trying time for many people. And just to help us get our roots healthy again, add a little fertilizer to the root system, a little shoring up to the foundation, and really it's just some keys to help us understand where we may be off track a little and what we can do to help us get back into God's will and hearing his voice for ourselves and really running with it. Just some keys to help in our own understanding. I think that's the big thing that this book will give anybody.
So, Pastor Dan, what's the best way of getting hold of a copy of your book? Is my butt too big?
Well, honestly, the fastest way, Amazon. They're amazing. They published the book for me, so you'll get it direct from the printer instead of it coming to me and me sending it to you. Yeah, Amazon you'll find it quick and easy there. And I just ordered one just this week to see how quick it would come. It was 4 days. It was in my mailbox. So they're pretty amazing. But yeah, that's the quickest way.
But what if we want an autographed copy?
Well, then you could contact me at www.schooloffaith.ca and I could arrange that. And no extra charge for sure. But yeah, that's good, Al.
That's wonderful. Dan Fox is a pastor and author of the book, Is My Butt Too Big? Pastor Dan, thanks for joining us today on Bridge City News.
Thank you so much for having me, Hal. It's been a pleasure.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.